I was taking my driving test this morning, and my examiner was really interested in physics, and so I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss a stop sign or like take a wrong turn, tap my blinkers, and she's like, "Okay, so graphene is a single layer of atoms," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Welcome to the Emergence podcast, where we discuss ideas that have emerged from collaboration and interdisciplinary work in the physics department at the University of Illinois. Dr. Preetha Sarkar is finishing up her doctoral work in physics at the University of Illinois on strain superlattice effects on the electronic properties of graphene after defending her dissertation this past Friday, November 8th. She moves next to a postdoc position at Brookhaven National Lab working on quantum information. She has also fostered community at Illinois Physics as a leader of several organizations, including women and gender minorities in physics, peer mentorship groups, and science outreach groups. Yeah, welcome, Preetha.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a very kind introduction.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, I'm still not used to hearing doctor in front of my name.
I know. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll kind of like try to use it as like you think you were asked to be called doctor?
I don't think I will. Like, the more I see it written in front of my name, I realize that I was never aiming for that. And it just still looks strange. And everyone in my family is mostly a medical doctor, so I know how different my profession is from theirs. So I'm like, yeah, no, I'm okay. Not very- Maybe I'll just put a PhD behind my name
makes
in
sense.
certain situations.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. So, Preetha, what happy accidents and strategic choices got you to this point in your career?
So I think what got me into physics was it was one of my favorite subjects in school all throughout, and I like the fact that it's very simplistic in its approach. And I was a very curious child, and I would ask a lot of questions, and physics seemed to be a field where I can keep on asking questions, and so that's why I chose physics as my major in college.
Listed of questions.
But yeah, and my mother was a physicist, but I didn't really know much about research when I went to college, and so it was like mostly all my peers were doing research. So I was like, okay, I guess I need to do this as well.
Mm.
And so I have a bachelor's and a master's degree. Most of my bachelor's was spent doing research, which I realized I don't like. And so I'm like, okay, not that field. Okay, not this. And then during my master's, I started doing more experimental work in biophysics first. And then I realized I like working in a lab and just doing things myself.
And for reference, what was your bachelor's?
So in bachelor's, I did mostly theoretical stuff, I would say, like some astrophysics, which was like a lot of satellite data analysis of exoplanets. I did some remote sensing, but again, more data analysis than doing hands-on experiments, some high energy theory as well.
Yeah.
And then in my master's, I first did a project in France, which was doing atomic force microscopy on bacteria. And in general, it's quite hard to do that kind of microscopy imaging of bacteria because they tend to move a lot while imaging. And so the group I was working in, they had found this new way where you can kind of use electrostatic force to stick the bacteria in place and then image them. And so my role was to actually do the experiment. So it was nice because I was doing data analysis and more like conceptual stuff, but also hands-on physics. And I was like, okay, I like doing this. And so when I came back to India to finish my master's for my thesis project, I also chose experimental condensed matter. And it was more polarization-based experiments, like optical experiments, which I don't think optics is like my preferred field of research because I have terrible eyesight and like aligning things gives me a lot of frustration. But I just liked condensed matter physics in general, and like thinking of materials and their properties was a part of physics that excited me the most. So I think that's how I got into grad school. And my advisor in grad school, Professor Nadia Mason, she gave a talk in the graduate orientation course, and I really liked how she explained things. And everyone in our group was telling how nice it's to work there. And when I visited the lab, it seemed like things I would like doing, and that's how I got into the field that I
Yeah,
currently am in.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So do you what kind of physics did your mom work on, and do you think that her that kind of like influenced you to go into it as well?
So my mom did electronics and she was doing her PhD in physics when she got married, had my sister. Unfortunately, this is like early 90s India, and most people in doing physics at that time were mostly male and didn't have children and didn't know how someone could do physics and also raise a kid. And so I think she didn't get enough mentorship to finish her PhD. But so a lot of my uncle was also a physicist and they all did electronics. So I was kind of used to those concepts, but I don't think in terms of like choosing what field of research that played a role. I think in general, like my dad's a doctor, but when I was growing up, I'd like steal medicines from his chamber and like bring them home and crush them into paste to mix them and do things like with materials. And I think so. And I mean, I don't think it's related maybe, but like I used to like playing with dolls, and most of it was not like the typical playing with dolls thing people think about maybe, but just like creating things at like a very tiny scale, like like doll furniture and stuff, and how I can use paper to make things which are much more stable than just paper itself. And I think that training was useful later.
You heard it
in
here.
doing physics.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think yeah, I was told that you have to be like really smart and good at maths to do physics or whatever, but it was like those aspects of doing physics, like the like using very practical knowledge that interested me into physics
Yeah.
and choosing the fields I did. So.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. So on that note, could you, in like broad strokes, explain the research you conducted during your PhD?
Sure. So, the material I studied during my PhD is graphene, and it's the thinnest material known to man. It's a single layer of carbon atoms, so it's like a few nanometers thick. And even though it's very thin, it has the highest mechanical strength. And so, it's also the best known conductor of electricity and heat. So graphene as a material has been of interest amongst like physicists, engineers, a lot of people um, because of its properties. And so my project dealt with understanding that if we intentionally deform graphene, then how does that mechanical strain affect its electronic properties? And so on a day-to-day basis, what I would do was make these really small devices, which are like a few nanometers in length, and then where the graphene is somehow mechanically deformed. And then at very low temperatures, study how the transport in the system, so by passing a current, looking at how the voltage changes across the device, how that changes with like a temperature or a magnetic field and things like that. So
Oh, very cool. Just
yeah.
out of curiosity, what is it? Why is graphene so strong?
Um I think it's like the bonds in the material are just a standard electrostatic bond, and it's just its two-dimensional structure, which I think also makes it strong. But there's a caveat that even though it is in principle can sustain up to several terapascals of pressure, it's can also be very fragile in certain situations. So like It is strong, but not completely in the sense of like you can't probably balance an elephant on it or something. Like,
Gotcha.
there's a caveat to that. I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And you mentioned in a previous conversation that like the shape of the material you use or the device that you create kind of has like an egg carton shape.
Yeah. So it's essentially if you take a sheet of paper and think of it as graphene, and you put it on top of like a carton,
Mm-hmm.
then ideally the paper would be kind of suspended between those like pillars in that carton
Yeah.
and then kind of pinned to the top of the pillars. And so that kind of creates a mechanical deformation and on the piece of paper that's kind of periodic.
Yeah.
And so the samples I studied were essentially the same thing at like 1/10⁹ length scale from that, like a standard egg carton. But yeah, like at a very small scale of that same big egg carton
And then the
analogy.
stress would be wherever the paper is kind of like resting.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of like making like little tiny sets of things, like
Right.
you have your dollhouse and you know normal houses, you make it tiny.
Yeah.
You have an egg carton.
Mhm. Yeah.
Small.
It's just a tiny egg carton.
Yes. You just went into Barbie's fridge and just took
Yeah.
out the egg carton.
Yeah. I really like because the things I'm working with, I cannot really see them with my own eyes,
Mhm.
and I have to use like different microscopy techniques. But that's also part of it that like really excites me.
Yeah.
Of, like when I first learned about what a molecule is or what an atom is, it was
Mhm.
very exciting to think that this table I'm looking at is actually not just a solid thing, and there are like tinier particles in that. And so
Yeah.
I think like the science of small things in general is
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. You're getting me on board as well. I felt the
Yeah,
vibes,
yeah, okay.
yes.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that you wanted to work in material science so that your research could be more easily used in real life applications.
Right.
How does your current research allow you to do that?
Um, so yeah, even though my PhD has focused on uh, very fundamental physics properties of graphene, but there can be a lot of applications. For example, on the biophysics side, there are a lot of people because graphene has a high conductivity, both electrical and thermal, but it's also optically sensitive. You can make optical sensors out of graphene. And so people want to see like traditional silicon based technology. If you bend or apply any kind of mechanical strain to those materials, it usually deteriorates the performance. But for graphene, it can actually create properties that can be useful. And so people want to see like using materials like graphene, can we make bendable electronics like that conform to the surface of the skin or can mimic the shape of an eyeball and have applications in biomedical field in that sense. Um, and also like how electrons have charge or spin, and people want to use those properties of electrons to create new bits of memory and like quantum information applications. Electrons in graphene also has a degree of freedom called valley, and so how electrons can have like spin up or spin down. Electrons in graphene can also have two different valley property. And so people want to do something called valleytronics, which is use that valley degree of freedom to create bits of information. And so that's a more quantum computation electronics application, which people are interested in.
So is it like would stress like change how
Yes. So if there's if an electron in a material has spin up or spin down and you apply a magnetic field,
Yeah.
then the spin up and spin down electrons travel into opposite paths, for example.
Yeah.
In case of graphene, the electrons can be from one valley called K or another valley called K prime. And the origin of the valley comes from the electronic band structure, like details that are not relevant at this moment. But so if there is strain applied to the material, then like mechanical deformation can create something called a pseudomagnetic field. So it's not a actual real magnetic field in the system, but it has effects similar to a magnetic field. And this pseudomagnetic field is going to be 10 to 100 times higher than actual magnetic fields that we can generate in lab. So, for example, I think the highest magnetic fields, at least in the US, we can reach are of the order of 45 to 50 Tesla, and the pseudomagnetic fields are of the order of 300 Tesla or something.
Wow.
So that's like one aspect of it, is that you really cannot create these fields otherwise, and so it's opening up a area of physics that was not explored before, and also the electrons that come from opposite valleys face opposite pseudomagnetic fields. And so, because of the strain, they'll experience a pseudo field, which makes them travel in opposite directions. And so, you can kind of separate out electrons from the two valleys,
I see.
manipulate their properties.
Different currents.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Wow.
so I think that is like the ultimate goal of this area of research, is to like manipulate the valley degree of freedom and create applications with that.
Can you repeat how the valley degree of freedom can be used? You said it's used as an extra like information degree of freedom in computing.
Yeah, so like classical bits are 1 and 0, right? So you can think of, in terms of like electric charge, if there's a charge present, you can think of that as 1, and no charge 0, something like that. People want to use spin to create bits of information, and the idea is that if you have an electron with spin up, you can think of it as an 1, and if you have a spin down electron, it can be 0. And so information can be encoded or manipulated, read out based on what spin state the electron is at. And similarly, so valley is a third degree of freedom that electrons have in graphene. And so basically, it can either be on a K valley or a K prime valley. And that the reason it's called valley is literally, if you look at the electronic band structure of graphene, there are regions which are like valleys in the band. So,
And if you send this to us, we can put this on screen.
yes,
It's like a well structure,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay, perfect.
And so, depending on which valley the electron originates from, it can be assigned a 0 or a 1 state. And so, if you can separate those out using strain, then you have essentially created bits of information, and then you can manipulate them from one valley to the other. So, it's still a pretty young field of research, I'd say. Like, these pseudomagnetic fields were probably found experimentally like 14 years ago at this point. And yeah, like actually doing measurements at the device scale, I would say, apart from our group, there has been maybe 1 or 2 experiments that have actually happened. There have been a lot of theory predicted for these systems. So I guess the challenge is, like I said, that graphene, even though it's very mechanically strong, it's also surprisingly brittle, fragile. So actually making these systems and measuring and like knowing with conviction that what you're seeing is actually the phenomena you're studying is still a bit of a challenge, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
How many layers of graphene do you?
It's a single layer.
It's a single layer.
Yeah.
Okay, you
So
might have said that.
yeah, if there are multiple layers, there are additional interesting properties that show up,
I can imagine.
which I think has been explored more than maybe just pure strain, like all the stuff about moire, superlattices, magic angle twisted bilayer graphene was all the rage a few years ago, and I feel like people are now doing like twisted tri-layer graphene, twisted 4 layers, 5 layers, whatever. So
I've seen these words.
yeah, so I think that's like also a very in topic.
Yeah.
2D materials. Yeah.
So would it be accurate to say that when you add strain to graphene, so like adding like pressure, like force to it, you increase its capacity to hold information?
In broad sense, yes. but there are added complications of what exactly does the strain profile look like, or um, there are certain issues with separating out those two valley currents, and usually we have to resort to some other property like another small magnetic field that's applied on the system, or another electric field, or like polarized light, something else that can separate out those two valleys. But in principle, yeah, it's mostly dependent on the fact that graphene is strained that creates that valley based information. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And is the B field created, or the effective B field created, proportional to the strain applied?
B field being a magnetic field.
Or yeah.
Yeah. There is I guess, a more complicated mathematical form. So the way it appears is, so in terms of quantum mechanics, everything is like things happening in the Hamiltonian, and so which kind of describes the energy of the system. And so if there's any kind of electric field or magnetic field applied in the system, then there's a new term that appears in the Hamiltonian that adds the energy. And so in case of graphene that is mechanically deformed, um, I guess the most conceptual way of thinking about it is that if there's an electron sitting at one atom, one carbon atom in graphene, it wants to hop on to like the nearest neighboring atoms. But initially, if graphene is not strained, then the energy it would require to hop to any neighboring atom is going to be the same in all directions. But if you mechanically strain it, then maybe one neighbor is closer to this current atom than the other neighbors. And so there's kind of an isotropy in like the electron will need more energy to go in a certain direction, and it will need less energy to go in other directions. And that affects the Hamiltonian of the electron, which kind of describes the energy. And so it appears as something called a gauge field, and a gauge field has associated magnetic field. So that's where the maths comes in. But the main idea is that because the atoms are not equispaced in that sense anymore, so the electrons need different amounts of energy to hop from one atom to the next, and so on. So that kind of creates the effect of a magnetic field, basically.
I see. Thank you. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't follow that, but I trust that you guys. Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't really understand why people are interested in graphene, but now it's so interesting. So thank you for that. So when we were talking earlier, you mentioned some of the biomedical applications of graphene, like like putting it on skin and using that to detect like blood sugar levels,
Right.
or kind of like creating an artificial cornea with graphene. So you study resistance properties. Do
Yes.
those kind of fit into those biomedical applications at all?
In a sense, yes, because what we are studying is how fundamental properties of graphene are affected. And as a result of that, all applications with graphene will have a consequence. I guess the project I was working on won't have a direct impact on the biomedical applications, but yeah, I mean, I think when I was first getting started into this, I went to a lot of talks that were happening around UFI, centered on like what people in like some of the bio departments are doing with graphene and like the applications. And like Mari was saying, I want to do research which has more direct applications and like real life, and so that got me really interested in the field. So um, I guess most of the biomedical applications, like the ones we were talking about, the ones, for example, which conform to skin and detect changes in like blood sugar and so sugar levels in sweat, are kind of reliant on the transport properties of graphene. So, like how its resistance changes with the introduction of different molecules near it. And so that is kind of related to what I do in the sense that just mechanically deforming graphene changes its electronic properties. And so that has some link, but it's like not as directly related, I would say, as many of the other fields.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, awesome. Great. So,
Yeah. So, other than your research, you've contributed to the physics community through undergraduate mentorship, science outreach at the farmers market, some graduate school advisory committees, like just to name a few. You've done a lot.
She does it all.
Yeah, really though. What was your favorite way that you contributed to the Illinois physics community over the course of your graduate studies?
Um, I think the two groups I've worked with the most were women and gender minorities and physics, and also guidance for physics students. And we used to host these annual retreats where we would go to like some Girl Scout camp or like some campground nearby and do a bunch of activities like
Is this for the women?
yeah, both
Okay.
and also for GPS
okay,
for
both of
both
them.
of them. We would go to Camp Vigiwagon a lot. It's close to Springfield, and it's a Girl Scout camp which would rent out for the weekend and have like a bunch of um like just activities outdoors, but also like arts and crafts and um like some professional development stuff and just like people talking about their research in layman style. And both of those I think helped me at a personal level a lot to just get to know people in the physics department, both graduates and undergraduates, and learn about their stories. And I think I made a lot of friends through both of those groups. So that was one satisfying part. And the other was probably all the mentorship activities with the undergrads. And a few of them were in my defense talk, and they were saying that, oh, I really wanted to tell you that you're one of the reasons I got into research. And I'm like, that's so sweet.
That's so
And someone was like, I wanted to write that in your card, but there was no space. And I'm like, can you add that? Because that made me really happy. So I think that's another fulfilling thing. I mean, we would ideally want everyone to feel like supported and get all the resources they need to succeed in the physics department and just as a researcher or a physics student. And I think unfortunately that doesn't happen all the time. So the fact that some of them said that I can make a difference in their life is like very nice to hear. So
That's such a
yeah, it's like not something I was expecting necessarily, but then I was like, that made me really happy.
That is rainy day
Yeah.
material. You
Yeah.
just pull it out.
Exactly.
I hope you got that written in the book. 'Cause that is
Yeah.
that's such a testimony too that your card was full.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah. And I didn't think about that, but it made me very happy, to be honest.
Of course. Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about the music and magnetism outreach program that you were part of?
Sure. So I guess it's kind of embarrassing because people have video evidence of me singing. But
We won't leak it. We won't let anyone see it.
but yeah, so the research I do is a part of Illinois MRSEC, which is NSF funded organization, and MRSEC also does a lot of outreach.
What does MRSEC stand for?
Materials Research Science and Engineering Center.
Okay.
And so they do a lot of outreach in the Champaign-Urbana community. And so through MRSEC, I have volunteered in this program where we go to the local middle schools, and it's like a semester-long program, and usually it will be either a MRSEC professor or a student who introduces a topic to the students in class, and building up on that, they write their own songs. But the thing I was involved with, which involved the music, was we made a song called Graphene Has My Heart, which was a parody of Dua Lipa's Break My Heart. And so we rewrote all the lyrics and like put it to Tian, and it was basically discussing graphene. And a professor also put in like some animations in the music for us. So there was a lot of autotune involved. But yeah, that was one of the things we were doing at the height of the pandemic, and so it was also a nice way to like keep in touch with everyone when we were not seeing each other. So yeah, I think apart from that, I've done a lot of like through the MRSEC program, done a lot of outreach with the superconductivity stuff, which is always, and like liquid nitrogen, which is always fascinating for the middle schoolers. So we have shattered a lot of flowers, like frozen in liquid nitrogen, and they love doing that. And liquid nitrogen ice cream is always a hit.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, those are really fun.
Kids love ice cream.
Yeah.
It turns out to be really well, like super effective. Like, so,
So
so-
if the listeners are familiar, you can like take all the ingredients for ice cream and
Mhm.
then add liquid nitrogen, and it makes it like pretty quickly, right? Turns it
Yeah.
into ice cream.
yeah, I mean, it depends on how smooth you want your ice cream to be. So you have to whisk it while it's kind of cooling in the liquid nitrogen, but it's like 15 minutes or so,
Yeah.
maximum. So then you get like really good consistency.
I might
Yeah.
be remembering wrong, but you also there was a thing with like the ukulele or guitar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a newer iteration of something I did. Yeah. So basically all sound waves are some kind of vibrations, and either vibrations in air or some material. And what we wanted to do was these vibrations can also be converted to electrical signals. And a lot of my research, for example, connects like mechanical properties of material with its electronic properties. And so we wanted to kind of bring all of those concepts together. So there's something called piezoelectricity, which is like piezoelectric material. If you give it some kind of mechanical stimulus, like you tap on it or something, it can produce an electrical signal. And these materials can actually be bought online anywhere. So you can, so we got these small.
Oh, is that how they make theremins?
I think so. It might be related. I know it's used a lot for like amplifying, or like if there are any acoustic guitar or drums and you want to convert those to electrical signals, so they just take those piezoelectric elements and attach it to whatever the thing is vibrating and then you get a signal from it. So you connect it with wires. And
Oh, that sounds familiar.
so what we were doing was basically we bought those of, well, probably Amazon. I'm not sure, but it's pretty easy to find them online anywhere. And
That's cool.
we got some of those piezoelectric elements and we attached them to like ukuleles and guitars and tuning forks, any random thing, and just connected it to oscilloscope, which reads out electrical signals. And so I think the kids really liked like seeing different notes that can be produced by different kind of strumming patterns and actually seeing a difference visually through the electrical signals. And some of them are also trying to like hum near the piezoelectric element and see what signal they produce or like match it with the ukulele chord we were playing. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was like very simple to make, but I think the kids really liked it during the open house. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that's how tuners work, if they just have these like piezo devices.
I think the ones on the phones definitely have something like that.
Yeah.
It's just converting one energy form to another.
Yes. That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds really engaging too. For
Yeah.
like a big, wide range of audience.
It was a hit. The unfortunate part was those piezoelectric elements are pretty cheap as well. So the wires come off very quickly, and then the kids got really excited, and then suddenly nothing was working, and we realized, oh, they've like tugged the wire off, and so we had to fix it again. But so we went through several piezoelectric elements in like an hour, but it was fun. I think the kids really liked it.
Where can you get peas? I almost want to get some.
I can send you the link. I think it's, if you look up something like drum signal converting,
Drum signal.
electrical something,
Okay.
vibration will show up. I think if you look up piezoelectric, it might not show up because that's like the scientific term for it. But I can't remember what the layman's term for that thing is called. Yeah.
But they're cheap once you find the layman's term.
Yeah, it's like you can get 50 for $10 or something, and if you're careful with them, they'll last for a while. So.
Now I want to attach them to
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. It was a lot of fun. Like you can even like tap them and see signals created, which is really nice. Yeah.
In 2023, you were runner-up in the APS Forum on the History of Philosophy of Physics essay contest for your piece on Meghnad Saha. Why did you choose to write about him?
So okay, I should maybe say something about Meghnad Saha. So he was an Indian astrophysicist. So the part of India I'm from, it's on the eastern side. I'm a Bengali, and so he was also a Bengali astrophysicist. And um, there are several other physicists who are like probably known more internationally, but Saha's ionization equation is something that astrophysicists use a lot. And um, unfortunately, not many people know about him. And his story, even when I first read about it as a kid, was very inspiring to me. And in India, there is something called the caste system. And so people from lower castes historically haven't been given as many opportunities as like the upper castes have gotten. And so, um, irrespective of all of the challenges he faced, Meghnad Saha was still able to succeed and be a physicist of a lot of renown in India. And it was, I think, the parts of the story that really was fascinating to me was like that was made possible through the support and mentorship of a lot of people with good intentions. And I think it goes to show how, if you build a supportive community, it can really help a lot of people succeed in the sciences. And he was also always focused on physicists doing good in the society through their work. And so like the social impact of the research we do and like working on projects that can like have an impact on the community around you. And so for both of those reasons I felt like, okay, I need to write about him. And like the the essay contest was just focused on topics which are related to either history of physics or philosophy of physics. And um, because he kind of went to the same undergrad institution I went to, had very similar backgrounds in certain senses. I was like, okay, I want to share this story with everyone who might not be aware of it. So that's why I chose that topic.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
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 It was nice. I also unearthed a lot about his life that I didn't know before that, so which was nice. Like he was also very active, and this was like pre-independence India, and so he had been very politically active while he was in school, even a middle schooler, and like that had some negative consequences in his career. Like he was had to switch schools different times, and like other people had to bring him back to the institutions. And so yeah, he had quite a colorful life that I didn't know about otherwise. So.
Can you describe, I guess, the community of people who propped him up and surrounded him a little bit more?
Sure. So yeah, like I was saying, this was like pre-independence India, the early 1900s, and so um, a lot of Indians all over, like what is currently India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they were protesting. And he was born in Bangladesh, and like when he was in middle school, because he was involved in some protests, the school he went to suspended him. However, some of his teachers recommended other schools he could go to, and he was really excellent academically. And so he eventually managed to finish school and then go on to college. Um, and he came from a very like not of a great financial background, and so a lot of people whom he wasn't really related to or who just saw his potential, funded his move to Kolkata, which was the capital, and the rest of his education. Even after he graduated from my university with a physics degree, he was not getting a job anywhere. And then someone was like, okay, you can come to my college and teach. And that's how he got into like teaching and research. And so, yeah, it was like a lot of, I would say, teachers who played a valuable role in his life. And I think the profession we have all chosen kind of in like academia and just like research, I think we can do a lot of bringing in people who haven't had so many resources. And like,
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful testament to like human generosity or scientist
Right.
generosity, propping each other up,
yeah, exactly.
bringing someone in who maybe doesn't have the resources.
Yeah.
Here, let me help you out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
really cool.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, that's what we need right now.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you also in your essay, you kind of talked about Saha's role in like the reconstruction of India. So it sounds
Hmm.
like he was pretty involved in like reconstructing infrastructure. And
Yeah.
then you also kind of touched on how it was important to him to like decolonize science
Yeah.
so that he also kind of reconstructed like academics in India as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
Could you? Yeah.
Yeah, some of the aspects of that. So, for example, these were some of the topics he himself spoke about. Was like the railway system in India was built by British engineers who had never really visited India, and so weren't really familiar with like the geographical conditions in India, for example. And so, to make the railway lines, they would make embankments and which would kind of restrict the water from flooding to drain into like bigger water bodies and things. So there would be constant floods, and this was a result of like the colonization of science, where people were applying scientific principles and making engineering solutions that were not really meant for that region. And so I think he did a lot of work on improving those, like the irrigation system in India, because especially around 1940s, there were several floods in eastern India, which created multiple famines. And like it was really hard for a large section of the Indian community during that time. So he worked on those, improving like electrical lines and things like that. So, and also as a professor in India, he played a big role in really making some institutions a welcoming place for a lot of people. So, yeah.
Yeah. That is so outward facing.
Yeah.
Work on infrastructure.
Yeah,
while being a
exactly.
physicist? That's wild.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked that. Like, and also examples as like tangible as those that really tell you that, okay, we do have a social role as a scientist as well,
Yeah.
and how our actions and what we do can have a consequence. As that was like a thing that really I could connect with. So,
That makes sense. I mean, you mentioned liking that your research has applications.
yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not infrastructure in that,
Yeah.
but it's like still like, yeah, I think it's really important to.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are responsible for me being whatever I am right now. So I think it's difficult to not think about any of that while continuing on with my career. Of like, if people have helped build me up, then I also feel like I have a responsibility to give back to that society. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on that topic, you talked a little bit about working at a soup kitchen, and I feel like a lot of physicists they get like siloed away in labs and don't think about the community. And while we're talking about someone who was so outward facing, I wanted to hear more about your experience working for the soup kitchen.
Yeah, I guess well that had nothing to do with doing physics, but I'm glad I did that anyway. And everyone in the soup kitchen tells me, oh, we don't see too many people from the physics department here. So people from the physics department should go and volunteer at the soup kitchen more, just so that they know that physicists exist. Like everyone is like, you must be really smart. Oh, I don't ever see physicists outside the lab, whatever. But yeah, I kind of started that a couple of years ago when I feel like I was spending most of my time in the lab doing like science stuff. And I realized, oh, I want to know what life is outside this, to just get a bit more perspective in the world I live in. Like my experiment not working today is not necessarily the end of the world, and there's like bigger things out there. And so I just went to the soup kitchen and signed up as a volunteer for the weekends, and it's just a couple of hours every weekend. But I think it has helped me connect with a lot of people in the Champaign-Urbana community who are not within the department. And yeah, it also feels nice to be able to give back to people in a very tangible way, in that sense that um yeah, I can see the change in their lives that quickly. So I'll miss it. It has also like it's been nice. For example, I work a lot with the desserts in the soup kitchen, and I have realized I'm not good at cutting cakes or pies or anything like it. And they tell me, huh, so I guess physicists can't do everything, or like just because you have a PhD doesn't mean you can cut a cake properly. And I was like, yep. So it's a good wake up call, and like you feel too full of yourself that yeah, like there's a lot more out there in real life. So it's been a nice distraction from the grad school stress, but also like I guess broadened my perspective about the outside world a lot.
Yeah, that makes it's so easy to get like caught up in like, oh, my experiment's not working. This
Hmm.
isn't happening. And I would imagine it's like a nice thing to be like, wait, there's
Yeah,
a world outside of this.
yeah, and it's nice also because people are just curious about physics, and I feel a lot of them feel intimidated by physics or maths and stuff like that. So um everyone asks me, oh, what do you work on? And then I have to explain it like in very simple terms, and so that has been good practice, I think, as a science communicator, of just trying to really break my research down into simple terms without any jargon. So,
Yeah. And I mean, that's a service as well.
yeah.
You know, it's really great to engage with members of the general community,
Mhm.
especially not in academia. And say,
Yeah.
hey, look,
Right.
this is what we're doing and it's approachable.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, because like a lot of our research is like public funded, right?
Yeah.
So um yeah, I think it just plays a bigger role in society that people know that okay, their taxes are going for actual good effects that the society will see in the future through these research stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And do you find that you are usually able to communicate that work to like folks that you meet at the kitchen?
Um Sometimes yes, but other times no.
But they're curious and excited about physics in general.
Yeah, exactly.
regardless.
I think
Yeah.
that's always exciting. I was taking my driving test this morning, and my my examiner was really interested in physics, and so I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss a stop sign or like take a wrong turn, tap my blinkers, and she's like, "Okay, so graphene is a single layer of atoms," and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." So it's always exciting to see like how much people want to learn, and
Mhm.
they pick up bits and pieces of information from here and there, and they're like, oh, so do you know about this topic? Or like, yeah, someone was asking me something about like high energy physics, which was kind of complicated for me to completely understand, but they had listened to some podcast episode about it and they really liked
Yeah.
it. So that's always, I think that's the nicest part of what we do, is finding out that people are actually excited about it. And I think that also makes me excited about what I do, of like there is a bigger picture outside like publishing a paper or like getting a degree or an award or something like that, like just like advancing human knowledge and uh, satisfying curiosity. So I think like sometimes talking to people who are not directly engaged with research helps me realize that. So,
It's really awesome to see how fascinated.
yeah, yeah,
It's so cool.
yes.
I love engaging with that
Yeah.
fascination.
Yeah.
I heard about the outreach event that happened at Urbana Library like a few months ago, and
Yeah.
there were like a lot of kids who were really excited about it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. We love SciComm. We love
yeah.
So what are some goals that you have for yourself for the next 5 years?
Let's see. So I want to obviously continue doing research. There are some logistical issues. So currently I'm going to a national lab as a postdoc, but
Mhm.
obviously I'm an international person in this country. So there are issues of visa, which will ultimately determine how long I stay in this country or not. But irrespective of where I am geographically, I think I'll continue doing research.
Mhm.
I'm moving more towards like quantum applications, so like more quantum computing research.
Mhm.
But I probably can come back to 2D materials again. I just wanted to expand my research horizons for a bit. And I also want to stay involved with teaching. I don't know whether traditional academia is a path I want to go down, but even in like other non-conventional forms of teaching or science communication, whether it's online, I do want to um, make research and just science more accessible to Indian high school students or
Mhm.
school students. A lot of people just don't know what research entails, or like are learning physics concepts that were like set down maybe 50 years from now, but like really don't know what's happening in the labs now. And so I'd like to work in some form and improving that. Although I'm not really sure right now what that's going to pan out. I just I'm finishing up with my PhD, and then it's going to give me hopefully a little more time to think about that. Maybe start writing a blog or something more physics related. So that's kind of the plan for now.
Yeah, you got
5
plenty
years.
of time. Those are all great goals, and the rest we're all just figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the final question, we like to end each episode on the same question. So in physics, emergence is used to describe a behavior which occurs at large scales but not at small scales. So in other words, for an emergent system, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. For example, when blackbirds flock together, the group will kind of move and bend in a way that the individual bird is not. So can you give us an example of emergence from your work or just kind of like life experience?
Sure. Well, I guess in my work, we kind of go the other way of like things when they're really big behave in certain ways. And then as they get even smaller, their behavior changes. So like bulk materials like graphite, they have very different properties than a single layer of graphene, or like Samari was saying, multiple layers of graphene stacked together. And so the fact that we can separate out that single layer from the thick layer of graphite itself was a feat which won the Nobel Prize. And since then, because we can get to that small level, I think a lot of physics has emerged, which wouldn't have been possible otherwise. But I guess, like on a more philosophical note, and this is a question I have asked myself a lot through grad school, is like, okay, what I'm doing in the lab on a daily basis, is this actually creating a change? And then I guess it was like maybe when I was finally writing my thesis, that like when I was telling a story of like, okay, this is what was known, this is what was still to be known, and then this is how this work has improved the field of knowledge, it kind of made more sense of like how each of those tiny things we work on in Loomis or MRL or like wherever in this big physics department, how all of that comes together to like tell new stories and like give better explanations about the world around us is, I guess, kind of an emergent phenomenon in itself.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's from going from the small to the big and how it creates a bigger change in the world. But
we start very, very small. Got very, very
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I feel about it, I think.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. Yeah. No better way to end it than you just did. So thank you so much, Preetha, for
Thank
coming
you
on the
for
show.
having me. And I love this tea. It's so good. I just have one sip of it, but it is so good. I was like,
Yes.
finish this.
You gotta, listeners, you gotta come on the show, and you too can have some tea with us and hang out. It's very chill.
Yeah.
And very
Super
cozy.
Yeah, it's very cozy. Yes, it's a rainy day. Come on down to the Independent Media Center and do a radio broadcast with us. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and stay connected.
For further readings and resources about the topics covered in today's episode, check out the links in the description. Thanks for listening and stay connected.